Hello everyone, welcome to AWS and Devops. In the last video, we have seen that what is 3-tier architecture or what is n-tier architecture. In 3-tier architecture, we have three layers: client layer, application layer, and database layer. In this, application server and database server will communicate with each other through a private network. In the application server, the bottom layer present is hardware. Hardware can be motherboard, CPU, disk, network, or memory. Above that, we have operating system like Linux or Windows. Then we have applications present in application server. Applications can be Java, Python, .NET. Similarly, in database server also we have multiple layers. At the bottom, hardware, then operating system, then database present, which can be Oracle or MySQL. In this, application server has its own 4 GB RAM, and database server also will have its 4 GB of RAM. As client will communicate through a public network, then we have a web server which will act as a public network. Then we have seen some basic definitions. Then what is application server? The server which has application hosted is called application server. Then what is database server? The server which has database installed is called database server. Then what is web server? It takes request from client and redirect to the application server. It means web server will forward request to the application server. Then just for understanding, we have seen that some application server and web server. Which application server we know? Tomcat. Which web server we know? Apache or Nginx. Multiple companies can use multiple servers, but just for understanding, we should know exactly which servers we know. So now let's move today with today's topic, that is DNS. What is domain name server? Okay. Now for example, if I am typing any website on the browser, then browser will access this website. So browser require two things to access any website, that is IP address and host name. Like if I am typing google.com in the browser, so browser require two things to redirect to this website. What are those two things? One is IP address and host name. Then the question is, who will provide this IP address and host name? It is a DNS, domain name server. Domain name server will provide the IP address and host name. But how DNS will provide this IP address and host name, we will say that in details. Now let's assume that we have one laptop. Let's assume Ganesh is using one laptop. This is Ganesh laptop. Okay. Now Ganesh is opening browser in his laptop to access one website. Ganesh is using browser in his laptop to access website. Let's assume that Ganesh is accessing google.com in his browser. Now, for browser to access this website, browser require two things. What are those? IP address and host name. IP address and host name. What is full form of IP address? Internet protocol address. And second is host name. In the last video, we have seen what is IP address and host name. What is IP address? It is a unique identifier for a device. It is unique identifier for a device. Then what is host name? It is the name of the server. Okay, for a browser to access anything, it requires two things. What are those? IP address and host name. Then the question is, who will provide this IP address and host name? That is DNS. Now for example, if browser has IP address, then DNS will provide the host name. Or if browser has host name, then DNS will provide the IP address. Then what is the definition of DNS? It keeps track of IP address and host name. Or what is alternative definition of DNS? It converts IP to host name or host name to IP address. What is the definition of DNS? It keeps track of IP address and host name, or it converts IP to host name or host name to the IP. Now, for example, browser will check this website or this IP address in the local DNS. Why browser will check the IP address in the local DNS? Because, for example, if I am frequently accessing any website, like if I am frequently accessing google.com, this google.com website will store in my local machine, for which path is /etc/host. Now browser will check the IP address where in the local DNS. Browser will check the IP address in the local DNS, for which path is /etc/host. Okay. Now browser will check the IP address in the local DNS, for which path is /etc/host. Now if local DNS do not have this IP address, then local DNS will forward request to the root name server. Local DNS will forward request to the root name server. Now local DNS will check the extensions like .com, .in, .gov. Okay, root name server will check the extensions like .com, .gov, .in. For us, what is the extension? .com. Okay, now these extensions are called as top level domains. These extensions are called as top level domains. What is our top level domain here? .com. It means root name server will identify our extension which is .com, and root name server will identify multiple extensions which can be .in, .gov, .com, .co, .in. Okay, it can be multiple extensions like .in or .org. See now, browser require IP address. Browser is providing host name google.com, but browser require IP address for this. Who will provide this IP address? Domain name server. Then first browser will check the IP address in the local DNS. In local DNS path is /etc/host. If local DNS do not have this IP address, then local DNS will talk to the root name server. Root name server will identify the top level domains. Top level domains can be .com, .in, .gov, .org, .in. Okay, this top level domains, which is our top level domain here, .com. Then now root name server will forward this request to the name server. Root name server will forward request to the name server. Okay, what is the work of name server here? It identifies the domain names. It identifies domain name. Okay, now for example, root name server has provided .com, which is top level domain for us. Okay, because our website is google.com, but there can be the multiple extensions with .com. It can be google.com, it can be instagram.com, it can be amazon.com. But from this multiple website, which one is our website? That is google.com. Then who will identify this uh, top level domains? It is name server. It means name server will identify from the multiple website, it will identify google.com. Now name server has identified this website. Now name server will forward this request to the stat of authority. Name server will forward request to the stat of authority. Stat of authority. Now this stat of authority will have the IP address for this website. It means stat of authority has IP address. and this data authority will redirect the IP address to this our browser, and this is how browser will get the IP address from the DNS domain name server. What is the process? If browser want to access any website, it requires two things, which is IP address and host name. For example, browser is accessing host name, then DNS will provide the IP address, or browser has IP address, then DNS will provide the host name. Okay, what is the definition of DNS? It keeps track of IP address and host name, or it converts IP address to the host name or host name to the IP address. Now first, browser will check the IP address where in local DNS. For local DNS path is /etc/host. If local DNS do not have this IP address, then local DNS will forward this IP address to the root name server. This root name server will identify extensions like .com, .in, .gov or .org. Which one is our extension? .com. It means what is our top level domain? It is a .com. There can be multiple domains. Which one is our top level domain? That is .com. Now this root name server will forward request to the name server. What is the work of name server here? It identifies the domain name. Okay, as there can be multiple .com extensions like .com, google.com, instagram.com, amazon.com. Okay, which one is our website? Google.com. Then what name server will identify the our website, which is google.com. Now web name server will forward this request to the Statop authority, and Statop authority will have the IP address of this google.com, and Statop authority will redirect this IP address to the browser. Now this is the one part of domain name server. Now how this IP address along with host name will go to the servers? We have seen multiple server, which is web server, application server and database server. Now this IP address will go to the web server, from web server to the application server, from application server to the database server, that we will see in the next video.